Hold on, John. All right, here we are. It is May 10th. I understand that this coming weekend is Mother's Day. So happy Mother's Day to all those mothers listening. We have a great guest today, and welcome to the Digital RoundTable. My name is Andres Carvalho, CEO and founder of CMG Consulting and Professor Fellow and Director of the Cedar Center at Texas State University, and your host at the Digital Roundtable. But before we get started with our show today, we have our own John Sibley Butler giving us some tunes.
If it's love that you're running from, there's no hiding place you can't run, can't hide. Love has problems, we all know, we just have to face. And oh baby, so if you just put your hand in mine, we're gonna leave all our problems behind. Gonna walk and don't look back. You don't look back. You don't look back.
Woo! Good job, Johnny.
Johnny, I think we've heard enough from you today. It was beautiful and brilliant, and I'll take the lead in the talking, if that's all right.
John Butler, how are you, sir?
I am doing fine with my great colleague Llewellyn. I'm still reading his wonderful editorials. They're absolutely wonderful. And you know, in the field that we're doing, there looks like a pushback on electric vehicles. And I think that's very, very interesting. If you look at the data on how people are planning to buy automobiles, electric vehicles are not at the top of the list anymore. So there seems to be a pushback or a reality of the relationship between those vehicles, of course, and what we could really fund and run in America. So I found that very, very interesting. And of course, the other interesting thing is the country itself. It looks like we're creating lots of jobs in new different areas. I think that the 60-minute piece on AI scared everybody to death. We got a lot of questions about that, about the relationship between AI and future employment. And of course, Llewellyn wrote an excellent essay containing that. And the other thing, of course, is just the world. Whether it's in India, the fighting, whether it's in Europe, the fighting, and whether it's in America. To me, Llewellyn, we having trouble being an American now. You know, I look back at the Kennedys, sacrifice in war, lost a son to the presidency, a son in World War II. They were Americans first. And right now, people seem to be Republican and Democrat first. There's no sense to me in all the problems that we had that we're going to solve it as Americans rather than splitting off into different political parties. And the final thing is the city of Austin is doing great. I had an opportunity to play golf with ex-mayor Alder at my golf club and talk about lots of things. And but we have our problems in Austin, but it's pretty wild. So in sum, you know, it's interesting, as I always say, how smooth it is going for some people, and how difficult it is for other people, and it's all happening in the same kind of spectrum. So it's good and bad and ugly in the same spectrum.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up, Johnny. I think a big part of that is, you know, paying attention quite a bit. And I think we talked about it 2 weeks ago with McConaughey and Tony Robbins had a show where they, you know, had 2.4 million people listening, and people are trying to figure out how to build, you know, the right energy and all those things. And it's kind of fascinating what's going on. But let me find out, Johnny. You're in Austin today, right?
I am,
And Llewellyn King, how are you, sir? Where are you today?
I'm in Rhode Island, but I'm going to London tonight for a funeral, unfortunately. But I'm in Rhode Island. The sun is shining, and the sense of well-being is, I think, totally deceptive, because we have a very ugly political situation. Neither party is inspiring anyone. The polls suggest that there's very little confidence in Biden as a candidate for the next time around because of his age. And even somebody as articulate and brilliant of the left as Harold Meyerson, who is a writer, have said, this just isn't true. Is he really running? Is he going to go out on the stump? He doesn't appear to have the energy, or for that matter, that much control over his own speech and deportment. It's a very serious situation. We have new stains on the personality of Donald Trump. We didn't think you could get any more staining there, but there's the new stain, which is the court decision in New York. And we have a very critical situation coming down the pipe with no immediate solution in sight, which is raising the debt ceiling. It seems that the administration has gotten serious late, and that the Republicans are unserious because what they're asking is so huge. This is not the Washington we used to know when people went into small, dark, smoke-filled rooms and solved problems. Now they go into well-lighted studios and exacerbate problems. I like Johnny's point about the delay in electric vehicles. I think they were going about it the wrong way. I read this morning that in little Rhode Island, about 1 million people, smallest state in the union, they're going to ban or make it impossible to buy an electric vehicle after 2035. Those decisions should not be made by government, local or national. They should be made by the marketplace. And I think if the marketplace were left alone, there would be a surge in both charging stations and new vehicles. But while there's this huge intrusion with tax breaks, etc., people are holding back. They're unsure, and they keep getting alarmed that if they buy an electric vehicle, they won't be able to charge it. We did not have a huge government intrusion when we went to air conditioning, and it happened pretty automatically because people wanted it. I think people want electric vehicles, but they're going to resist being coerced into getting into them. We've seen some other pushbacks that are interesting. There was a very good article by my friend Jennifer Hiller in the Wall Street Journal about people that don't want any more large wind farms. They don't mind small wind farms or basically widely distributed windmills. But when you see thousands of acres with thousands of these things, it's not very pretty, and it's probably a somewhat abusive use of agricultural land. It seems that within the utility industry, the enthusiasm for wind has now sort of shifted to solar because it's much more manageable. You know what time of day the sun shines. You do not know when the wind is going to blow. And so changes are taking place. There is apprehension in the utility industry about what's going to happen at the grid edge when you get a surge of electric vehicles, particularly in clusters, in high education areas with a lot of idealists, places like Boston, you're likely to get more. And so, but if you have a subdivision where everybody's gone electric, the pressure on the grid, on the local grid, is quite enormous. So lots of challenges all over.
Yeah, very interesting. Great points, Llewellyn. I wanted to ask you before I go and say hello to our guests and get rolling here, if you can give us 30 seconds or maybe a minute on the monarchy and the new king and what's going on with that as it relates to reality versus hip hop music, reggaeton, and society in general.
Well, it's an anachronism, the monarchy, but it works. And it works because it gives the nation a place to hang its emotions separate from its political system. When I came to the United States in 1963, I was sort of appalled to see that all the emotions had to be hung on the president. There wasn't somebody else. And most countries have some figurehead equivalent of a king. They call them the president, and they have the prime minister. Sometimes they kind of mix it up, like the Constitution for the Fifth Republic of France, the one now in force. But that sort of works. So the monarchy works, and the Brits put on the greatest show on earth. If you ask me about the individuals, the last queen was extraordinary, an exceptional human being. The current king is not very inspiring. He's a rather shallow, selfish, in some ways foolish man. And the royal family is dysfunctional, but it doesn't matter. It's an abstraction. If you think of it as a positive, then it's not very attractive. But if you think of it as an enduring abstraction that is good for tourism, good for the emotions of the nation, then it's a good investment by the British people.
Interesting. Well, so before I say hi to our guests, I just want to remind everybody that, the Digital Roundtable is all about the digital transformations, and we have been discussing over the years with leaders on these smart cities, smart grid, smart energy, all kinds of new technologies, telecom and Internet of Things, smart buildings, of course, and obviously EV charging, transportation, mobility of the future, all the way to how the Jetsons are going to come about. So our next guest is another high-tech expert. And let me say hi to Bill Pugh. Bill, how are you, sir? Oh, you're muted.
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. It's
awesome. Well,
honor to be here.
Thanks for being with us today. Before anybody can jump in and ask questions or anything, let me just share that Bill is the managing partner at Smart Connections Consulting. He'll be with us for about an hour. Prior to his current company, Bill was the director of product management at Sensity Systems, director of product management at Silver Spring Networks, marketing manager at Extratex Networks, marketing manager at Harris Extratex, field engineer at Cellnet Data Systems, and a program manager at Varian Associates. Bill holds, as I understand, a BS in electrical and electronic engineering from UC San Diego, and he has also had some executive certificates that he has gotten from Stanford University and the University of Phoenix. Bill, thank you for being with us. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So give us the pitch, give us the elevator pitch on your company, and perhaps a preamble on the space that you're moving and your focus. I assume still smart utilities, smart energy, but tell us about it.
Sure. So Smart Connections Consulting was born out of an evaluation of the market. Since, as you mentioned, I was an early employee at Silver Spring Networks, that gave me my introduction into the utility space. And at that time, that was right when the initial funds were being released for AMI. And I was employee 30 at Silver Spring. So we were really just getting started in terms of automated metering infrastructure and automated meter reading, realistically. Working my way through there, I wanted to get involved in distribution automation. I felt like just reading meters was not enough. If you're going to really be a smart grid company, you kind of have to have multi applications that run across that network. So I built out the distribution automation line of business for Silver Spring, and they went public. I moved on to Sensity Systems, where ironically I was employee 30 again. And I wanted to see, was there anything that was different? Did I catch lightning in a bottle or what have you? Because I had a few patents, had a successful line of business being built. And Sensity was a lighting company. So they were in around the time that the relamping effort was happening across the board. And it became clear to me after those two companies, once Sensity was acquired by Verizon, it became clear to me that cities, number one, the smart city movement was, hey, the cities have a lot of data. They don't know what to do with it. OEMs are going to come in and help them solve that problem. what they didn't realize in a number of instances is, one, when you go into to relamp or change their lights from sodium or any of the other older technologies to LEDs, the cities don't own the light poles. 9 times out of 10, the utilities own it. So they were in talking to the wrong people. Cities were like, yeah, we'd love to do it, but you got to go talk to the utility. Likewise, on the utility side, I saw that there was a gap between the cities and the utilities. And I said, realistically, I don't see how you can have a smart city unless you have a smart grid. And you can't solve the real problems unless you learn how to share data amongst the two entities. And that's where Smart Connections comes in. We work with cities to help them establish their strategies and execution plans. Likewise, as we were doing this, we realized that their skill-wise, they didn't have the software skills that were required to actually, do the stuff once we actually set those plans in place. So Smart Connections came in and we build out digital twins for cities. Palo Alto was the first city that we built a digital twin for their traffic. And we continue to do that over the course of the past 10 years now. And now we're actually, out of all of that have spun off a new company that will be a all services company. So we'll be launching that company in the next 2 to 3 months. And I think it's a perfect time. I love what John was saying about the EVs and everything like that, and what Llewellyn was saying about the EVs and everything like that, because all of that ties it all together. You can't have this notion of electrification without involving the utility. You can't have the notion of microgrids or any of those types of things without having the utility involved. And the city has to be involved because they're the ones that are initiating the citizen engagement and everything like that. So I think it's a perfect point of inflection for everyone to kind of jump in and participate across the board.
Absolutely, absolutely, Johnny.
Yeah, Bill, congratulations on your success so far. Certainly, when Samuel Greengrad wrote the Internet of Things, he had no idea what the electricity demand would be like. And as you look at this gap, and I think if you go back and look at this program, there are two things that come up. This is a regulated industry, and as my colleague said, that when you get to the grid edge, it's very, very difficult. So given the fact that as you talk to cities, and when you hear people say things like, the smart grid is there, it's the biggest one in the world, and it's outstanding, it has performed outstanding. But as we add billions of things to the grid, and as you talk about the gap between the city and the enterprises, how do you think about the fact that we can't put electricity back on the smart grid? It is not using the applications that we have that can enhance it, as we've talked about a lot on this program. And the fact of the situation, we might be headed toward one big mess when it comes to electrifying everything that would be needed in, quote, the Internet of Things. So you have a great business model, but if there's not electricity, how do you look at all the technology that needed to enhance the smart grid?
That's interesting, because I think it comes from two ends, and it starts, for me, it starts at the substation. So from the substation down, right? I mean, utilities across the board, whether they be, investor-owned utilities, munis, or co-ops, all have these substations, and they have forecasting, and they have all of these other, bits of data that they should be using. Now you get down to the residential side or the commercial side, wherever it is, their answer today is to put in oversized transformers. And that is a capital cost that is really prohibitive, because you're never going to see a return on that. What they're doing is they're causing a larger problem. What they really should be doing is working with the homeowners, MDUs, and all of these other areas to understand when they're going to move to electric vehicles. You need to, the homeowners, I strongly encourage them across the board. Don't just get solar and storage. Because the notion of having, we are just now embarking on the ability to actually put energy back on the grid. And when I say that, let's be clear, we will be able to share energy with your neighbors. You're not sending the energy back to the distribution substation or anything like that. That is not happening. Energy was designed from the very beginning to go in one direction. It was not, the grid was not designed to be the recipient of energy coming back. So when talking to the cities, I strongly encourage them to bring the utilities in. Because I mean, Austin is a perfect example. When they had the deep freeze, power went out and the traffic lights went out. All right, so there was no battery backup installed. They had no reserves or anything like that. Working across the board with the utility and the cities, you now have the cities are aware or can be aware of what's happening with the grid and the health of the grid. But everyone's kind of ignoring the foundational pieces, and everyone wants to move to something that's sexy. And
now, Bill, let me just say this: in Austin, I think the city owns the utility, right?
In Austin, so Austin Electric, the city doesn't own them. In San Antonio, the CPS Energy reports to.
Both Austin Energy and CPS Energy belong to the city.
They report to the city.
Right?
Yeah.
No, they belong to the city. Yeah, we own the city. So my question is, and this is what happened with the great, when the great whiteout, quote unquote, all of the snow. And I think the question was a matter of, as I say it on this show, aircart was something that you got in the refrigerator. I don't know what it was, right? And then when it ate, but nobody understood the business model. And everybody, we jumped not on Austin Energy so much, but also on the city of Austin. So so there should not be a knowledge gap in Austin and in San Antonio where the city actually owns the energy. And I understand the gap that you're talking about, but my question is this, very briefly. You said, you're right, the grid was not designed to go one way. And you're saying that there's going to be sharing between me and my neighbors. I do understand that. So when you fit I'm trying to get to your business model. I'm trying to figure out how you get paid. So when you fit your business model into that, you were saying that there's a disjuncture, if you will, between the cities, in some cases, we'll say, and the utilities, and this is where you bind the gap.
Yep.
But in places like Austin, where they're 1 and 1, then that argument not work. So how do you make money? Let me just when you consult with them.
So first and foremost, there's a set of services, right? There's an understanding if they have initiatives. Almost every city that you go to will tell you that they are under-resourced. They don't have the resources. So you can help them with a strategy and an execution plan, but they don't have the resources to execute.
Right.
So the number one thing is I have a strong ecosystem of partners that I've worked with that help provide those solutions. So as the city is looking at writing RFPs and things of that nature, I help them with their requirements. I don't write the RFPs because what I want to do is continue to work with them through the implementation of it. And so the one of the foundational pieces is for a lot of the NIST work that's gone on, GCTC, Global Communities Teams Challenge, things like that. I've written some of the best practices, whether it be in cyber physical security, whether it be in wired and wireless networking, as well as digital twins. That's the end game for me is I believe that digital twins can provide insight where there is none today. If used properly, and everyone kind of says they have a digital twin. I'm not talking about the 3D CAD models that as digital twins. I'm talking about using the streaming data from the source and then creating a scenario, if you will, so that you can understand what's going on. And in the realm of electrification, I think it's going to be critical. If you start looking at fleets, and in the infrastructure bill, right, they call out that they're gonna unlock $1 billion a year up until 2026, I believe, just for buses. And I'm looking at this and I'm saying, well, okay, now we have buses that are at a depot, we have solar, so we have distributed energy resources that are involved in this. And now you're looking at what groups of people do you bring in, and leveraging a digital twin that's going to be able to ingest weather data, as well as forecast data, as well as, you know, the charging management, so that you don't charge when you don't have to, and you charge only based on the routes that you're going to run on the next day. I pull all of those pieces together and help them execute.
Okay, thank you. Your strategist, good. Okay.
Well, when we get to what's happening, I find different things are happening in different places in my reporting. For example, in some states are looking at, rather than having solar on the roof and a power wall or a battery in the house, putting the battery in the substation so that they have a dispatchable resource right there. And that is a model which is popular in the West, not so popular elsewhere, although several CEOs I've talked to see the utility of that and they could bring it about, because you take scattered distributed solar power, you concentrate it at the substation, and it becomes a dispatchable resource, which you probably need at the end of the day. That is another way of approaching the same thing, rather than having a lot of batteries scattered around a residential area, particularly, or a commercial area, with the attendant fire possibilities. You put this in the substation where it's much easier to manage, and where you might have a much larger battery and much more use, which provides at one removed two-way transmission between the homeowner and the utility. The homeowner is buying electricity in the traditional way, but through the substation is actually selling it back at some times during the day too. And this may happen elsewhere. The full impact of electric vehicles is really not well understood, because we haven't got good data on the disposition of them. If your local school board suddenly decides that 400 buses need to be electrified, the utility is going to have to build some pretty smart high connectors to be able to achieve that. And they're not going to be able to plug it in the wall back at the bus station. And there's time of day usage there, but they're also creating a potential asset. Now, it's very easy to sit around in an academic or a boardroom environment and draw little boxes on pieces of paper of how all this works. In reality, it's very complicated, and it requires a tremendous ability to manage data. But something is happening. AI, artificial intelligence, is entering the utility space. I'm doing a program with the U.S. Energy Association on this very subject, and it's getting a lot of excitement. And it's actually being deployed there already, which will make managing this now much more complicated world we have of users and generators, the Uberization, if you will, as I've said before, of the electric car and its ability to feed back, or the Uberization of the roof and its ability to feed into the system. It's never going to be as it was, where you have a generator sending power to a user. It's going to be a much more complex, interactive situation. I agree with you totally, Bill, that transformers are important, and where you put them is important. How big they are, whether they're going to be more pole transformers or more transformers, larger transformers, if you can get them at the substation. As you know, there's a tremendous shortage of transformers at the moment. The very large ones all come from China, and there's some security issues about those, and as there is about all bulk power supply equipment, and there's a shortage of almost everything in the utility industry. The supply chains takes 3 years to get a bucket truck, 3 years to get a transformer. It's a tough market out there at a time of change where you need new equipment to facilitate the change. But something that I've never seen before, there's an excitement in the utility industry, a sense of being on the frontier, of doing something huge that I have not encountered in my 50 plus years of writing about the utilities.
I totally agree. I mean, I think we're seeing, I mean, this is I go back to the infrastructure bill, right? I mean, this is the largest infusion of funding that we will see in our lifetime, I believe.
Yeah.
It's all encompassing. But what does concern me is it is the infrastructure bill, and we should be creating, we should be replacing the fragile infrastructure, particularly on the grid, as a first mover. I mean, we're trying to put band-aids over things that have had challenges because the infrastructure is 80, 100, 120 years old, and we've done nothing with it except damage it. So yeah. I mean, I believe that walking, crawling before you walk and walking before you run is the pragmatic approach, as opposed to, again, these makeshift bespoke solutions that keep coming up and receiving funding as a means of solving the grid reliability issue and the energy delivery issue and the distributed energy resource issue.
I think, Bill, I think that if I may, I think for the audience and, kind of help everybody understand, the challenge that we have is one of affordability. And there are many ways to understand that challenge. So the grid today, it's 3 grids, right? Physically speaking, managed by 10 wholesale institutions across the nation within the 50 states that deliver 1,100 gigawatts of energy at peak capacity, 1,100 gigawatts. Electrification of the grid will require, electrification of transportation will require the grid evolves to a 2-way power flow grid for batteries and energy storage at the edge and for EVs and what have you. And the challenge with that is that will require the grid to build communications or redundancy where it doesn't exist, primarily at the edge of the grid. And so there are many numbers out there. CMG Consulting, that is an expert on this topic, and John and I work there, of course. The number that we're using in the United States to upgrade the grid to that reality is roughly $4 trillion. And then on top of that, you need to create more generation for the electrification of transportation to the tune of going from 1,100 gigawatts to roughly 28,000 gigawatts. So that is 28 times the current capacity of the United States. And if you add $1 per watt to that account, you're talking about $28 trillion. So $4 trillion for the upgrade of the grid, $28 trillion for upgrade on the generation. There's $32 trillion, which is exactly the current national debt that the country has. So I don't think there is a capacity or a spirit or an appetite politically to go there with the numbers. So the question is, how do we skin the cat? How do we do this, in a more affordable way?
Well, let me add this. I think that we've had in Washington, D.C., we've had the grid, all of the research that's been done on the grid. And I would say that most of that research has not been utilized to upgrade the grid. I'm going to say that again. There are lots of research that's sitting on the shelf that has not been utilized to upgrade the grid. And on this show, we have asked this question: how could that be? It could be because if I am in a business and I'm making all the money I need to make on 1928 technology, why should I change? So, Andreas, I think if you look at all of the research coming out of the grid, commercialization of the revolution of the grid, in Washington, D.C.
Mhm.
is funded every year through, I guess, EPRI, right? Is that right?
Yep.
It is funded every year. We do all of the research, and the industry never sees it. So, Bill, answer this question. How do you upgrade a business from a technology point of view when the business itself is doing good? It's a regulated industry, and the utilities have to worry about, with every kind of technology, the revenues. And their slogan is, the lights will always be on in the cheapest way possible. So how do you deal with that complexity in the future?
Well, that's a good question. That is a good question. You know, I mean, it's my point of view that when we say top down, I just don't believe that that's going to make the change. Top down is going to continue to say exactly what you said. I think that it has to come from the bottom up, meaning that there has to be some local initiatives around. So I'm a big proponent of community energy storage. I think that is a good first start. If we can get to a point where we can initiate community energy storage as a means of, one, resiliency from I'll call the edge being the residence or the commercial building up, then you've got an element where outages will take place, but you won't really recognize it because you've got the storage facilities, you've got the distributed energy resources and what have you. So there, in that vein, I think that's a first mover that I'm a huge advocate of.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Bill. I totally agree.
What you have, Bill, if I might say so, the only concern I have about community storage, microgrids, possibly is another way of discussing community storage, is you get introduced more entities into a field that already has too many entities, too many regulators, too many utilities, too many of everything, too many planners, too many academics planning. And somewhere up here, you've got the Department of Energy putting in money almost without regard to where and how it's spent. I have not found a single utility that has got $1 of this infrastructure money. But I also have not found a single utility that is not working on upgrading its part of the grid, if only connectors, but certainly everything they can upgrade. So that's an odd situation. And then you have this business about transmission. Can we actually build new transmission to bring power from the resource-rich, and I'm talking primarily about wind and solar west, to the resource-hungry east? Or is that a pipe dream? Should you forget about it and see what you can do locally, both in generating, particularly through dispersed energy resources and virtual power plants, and realize that you're never going to build those huge new interconnectors from west to east to hook the western grid to the eastern grid, and that if you do that, you can't hook the grid edge to the grid edge. It's going to be a much different thing. It's easy to talk about this, but you can't do so. People are going to muddle through, and you know what? I'm not so sure that muddling through is the worst thing, because muddling through allows commercial pressures to come to bear. One of the things that's happening is the commercial pressures are being subsumed to political and ideological pressures. Like, you would not drive an ICE engine car after 2035. That's a psychological, political pressure. That's not a market decision. And if you don't have sound market decisions, in the end, the market, because there is a market, fails, or it becomes very dysfunctional and expensive, and the service deteriorates. So I think we need a time of analysis of where we are and continue to watch this evolutionary change take place, rather than try to hothouse it, which is what I think the Biden administration is doing, and a lot of local authorities. And you mentioned the municipal utilities. That is a powerful thing that they have to deal with. They have people who came off the school board, who came out of the Audubon Society, who are suddenly sitting on the council expressing opinions about how a utility should be run. By and large, they don't know. So you need some separation between the utility and its owners always.
Yeah.
As I see it, we have three kinds of utilities. We have the investor-owned, the municipal-owned, and the rural electrics. The lucky ones are the rural electrics, because they basically don't give a damn. They answer to no one and they get on with their thing. The worst off are the municipal ones, because they got all these political activists who think they're now qualified to run a utility.
Yeah. So I would say, Llewellyn, real quick, and then I'm gonna pepper Bill with some good questions for him to answer. But you know, we're seeing that already, that posturing changing. You know, Governor Newsom in California, who is running for president of the United States already, had made some incredible mandates that, you know, many Californians are still baffled about it. But he has already, by default and by the need of the market, had to change his mind about not shutting down nuclear plants, not shutting down coal plants, because California is just running out of power. And he wants to mandate to electrify the entire transportation sector. And what he's going to find out is what I've been touting since 10 years in the industry, in the last two on this show, is that California has some, you know, 40 million people living there, some, you know, 35 million cars. And when all those cars go electric, they're going to need, you know, 3,500 gigawatts, and they don't have the 3,500 gigawatts.
And Texas will be closed.
You're right. So
Bill, what's going to be very interesting is actually what Texas does.
Yeah.
The new plan, the new market, the structure of ERCOT, which could be either a tremendous leadership for the country, or it could be an example of how not to do this.
Yeah. So let me get back to Bill and take some of the knowledge that Bill has in that brain. So Bill, real quick, one of the key things for Silver Spring to win at the end of the day and conquer PG&E and Florida Power and Light and many other big accounts that you guys won was really the changing of the imagination in convincing the utility that metering could be managed in a much more broadband-like way with internet protocol. That telecommunication was a real big part of the business, that it was no longer about the electronic and the electrons, but how to manage those electrons. So tell us a little bit about the importance in your mind going forward of, you know, RF mesh in a proprietary sense is evolving to Wi-Sun. You got 5G, 6G, all this real-time communication seems to be, you know, prime for the electrification of all the vehicles, the smart grid of the future. How important is all this telecommunication? And tell us a little bit about your view on how this comes together.
I think, I mean, quite honestly, I think they went at the time that Silver Spring was starting out, as you mentioned, Florida Power and Light, PG&E, ComEd, and the likes. I think they went at it the right way, which was indeed, you know, let's meter read first, but this network can be used for more than that. Mm-hmm. And the criticality of it was changing a bit of the mindset. So the meter reading was a big deal because as I've seen across the industry, no one was able to do one important piece. Everyone, a lot of them could read the meters, but when they needed to issue a firmware update, it would take forever. Silver Spring was able to get that right, and it, you know, it might take, you know, 6 hours, 8 hours, but all of the meters were updated.
Mhm.
And I think that that was huge, and that was a huge demonstration point so that you could move to the next application. What I always refer to is when you have a wired or wireless network, I don't care what technology it is, the real question is, what's the cost to bring on the next application?
Mhm.
Because if the cost is significant, then the value of that network is diminished.
Mhm.
Distribution automation, as everyone knows, in that there's a lot of polling action that takes place, and
Mhm.
it's fast. And typically, when you look at a 900 megahertz frequency hopping spread spectrum network, it's not really meant for that.
Mhm.
But we took a different approach where it was a local poll as opposed to a round trip poll. So there's some technological, and that was the difference in Silver Spring. They were a networking company that solved a metering or a utility problem.
Mhm.
Now, post their acquisition by Itron, you see them moving now into the EV space. And I think that that's a good marriage because they're a networking company. Itron was more of a metering hardware company that had acquisitions in the distributed energy resource space and everything like that. So I think that there's a strong cohesive build there that now you can start to imagine the notion of distributed applications being dropped onto devices, whether it be a meter, whether it be an edge router, whether it be whatever it is, and the integration factors are smooth. So I think that as we start to look at the electrification, that they can help in a number of areas, as opposed to others that are I'll say vertically focused. Itron is much more across the board and play well with partners. I think that their notion of how they're integrating their network interface card into charging stations for the purpose of managed charging and protecting the grid, because they're not really looking at going down unless there's a meter up that's sitting behind the transformer, and there's PV sitting behind the transformer and things of that nature. There's no other company that I'm aware of that actually has the ability to manage the energy resources, give you guidance in terms of when you should charge and what the impact is going to be if you charge at a specific time. So I think my point of view is that these are necessary items for the consideration of electrification across the board.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this question. For the most part, you're a data company, right?
Yep.
And let's say that you are testifying now before, I don't know, the Senate of the United States, and I've got a check for $16 billion in my hand, just $16 billion. And that's a rounding error in Washington. And I ask you a question. What does your data tell you about the situation that we're in vis-a-vis the grid?
Ooh.
What would you do? I mean, you're a strategist, you're a database company, and you're not worried about these political attitudes. You're not worried about what I think. And America should be a country of data, of science.
Yep.
And I would ask you, what does it tell us? What does your data tell us that we should do?
My data tells us that we should stop looking at the sexy things and fix the doggone foundation. I mean,
Yeah, but
literally.
What does that mean?
What that means is bring the utilities up to par with each other, right? So you can find some utilities that from transmission to distribution to energy delivery, there are a few that are head and shoulders above the others. When you talk about distribution management systems, you can go to any given utility. Not all of them have an ADMS in place. Why don't they? They should all have something like an ADMS.
Well, Llewellyn said road electricity in the North Shore of New Orleans, where I'm from, the lights never go out. There's a Katrina, and we're doing fine. I mean, why do I need somebody from Washington, D.C. or from intelligent infrastructure to come tell me what I need? So my question to you is, I got 16 billion. What are you gonna do? What does it mean when you say they need to come up to par? Are you saying that everything should be standardized? All right, is the answer we should
100%
standardize
be
everything across the
standardized.
board? Okay,
Everything should be standard across the
so
board.
it'll be
One
just like
utility should not
Microsoft.
be better than the other.
Be just like Microsoft. You got a Microsoft computer? I have a Microsoft computer. The Microsoft sends a download, I get it, and you get it. And so you're telling me that the grid now, as we've noted here before, is where computers were 50 years ago. Everybody's got their own software. Everybody got their own solutions. What you're saying, you would tell a congressman or the senator, we need to standardize, download everything to everybody so that we'll know where all the electricity is at all times. Is that what you would tell them?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The transparency, we
I have a
need transparency.
Yeah, I have a consulting fee for that, and you can just send me 50,000 when we hang up. Yeah, because you know what happens is if we go to people with data and just ask a question, you know, are airplanes too complicated to fly now? Llewellyn was a pilot. Are we giving AI too much leeway in flying our airplanes? I was a helicopter boy in Vietnam, and the new helicopters is like it's like a game. But so you're saying
it's a very good question, Johnny. And there are those who say we have, and there are others who say we're asking more of the air traffic control system all the time, and it has to get more sophisticated. But it's a very interesting analogy between air traffic control and utilities. They're both real time. They both have great difficulty in upgrading because they're real time, because you can't shut them down for a month while you learn a new system or while you install something new. You can't shut a utility down and retool. You can't land all the aircraft in the air while you explain to guys that there's a new computer program and this is how it's going to work. So it's done piecemeal, it's evolutionary, it's not revolutionary, and we're not going to see anything revolutionary. The revolutions we've seen in the electric side were first the arrival of nuclear, which looked as though it would have a much greater footprint than it got, and then the conversion in the 1990s to, thanks to the aeroderivative turbine, to natural gas, and the plentitude of natural gas caused by both the technology of fracking and deregulating the market. The market went to work and produced gas. There would have been a gas bubble even without fracking, probably. And so you're going to get changes all the time, like a growing organism in the utility industry. I think of it as an organism, but you aren't going to get great, big, dramatic fixes, because if you do, you endanger the organism.
Yeah, let me while you guys are sitting tight, I want to share my screen real quick and show you guys a couple things, and I'll come back to Bill. So I just want to share with you all that Digital 360 Summit is coming September 26th to the 29th. It's going to be at Star Park in San Marcos, which is one of the many centers that Texas State University runs. And you probably know that I'm a fellow professor and director of CEDAR. These are the companies that spoke and sponsored last year. And then I want to remind you of Texas State CEDAR that I run at the university. And we're building these 14 labs on 800 acres on these 9 focus areas. And then I want to thank Texas State for sponsoring the Digital Roundtable. Bill, real quick, we're coming here to the hour, and I want to make sure that you get to shamelessly tell us about what's in front of you for the next 6 months. What's Smart Consulting, Smart Connections Consulting working in the next 6 months? What's in front of you?
So we're working hard with a couple of folks. One of them is the Autonomy Institute in Austin. So they've got a corridor that they're actually running for electrification and intelligent infrastructure. So we're working with them over the probably more than like a year, but then we're also working with Topio Networks on another intelligent infrastructure initiative as far as secure data governance and things of that nature. And then continuing to work with the cities. There's a number of cities in the Bay Area that we're working with. Continuing some white papers and everything on you know, intelligent infrastructure, what can be done, and of course I'll have my pieces on what I think about AI and ChatGPT and all of that stuff, which I think is kind of crazy.
Sure. Gentlemen, party thoughts.
Well, I think it's you're interesting. It's right at the center of where we're going in the future. Llewellyn would say we have to figure out how to apply the new technologies and to learn from the new technologies and make sure that we can understand them so they can serve us, right? And the other thing, I think, standing at the center of all of our programs is the electric utility companies. How do they get paid? How do they continue to prosper in a way that the lights are always on as these new technologies come aboard? So congratulations, and keep working hard. And the Autonomy Institute is a sweet spot, a wonderful, wonderful institute run by Jeff.
Thank you.
Llewellyn?
I think you're in a very interesting place, Bill. But as generally as an answer to what Andres just said, I think I said it already, we're going to see evolution, and you can't, when you've got as much technological change happening as we do now, you don't want to lock in too much too permanently. Most things have a design life of 30 years. So you want to be sure that you've got the flexibility to accommodate the right technology when it appears, and that you're not too far in front and not too far behind. Somehow find the sweet spot. The future is undoubtedly in machines talking to machines, and making decisions much faster than human beings can, as most airliners now are so-called fly-by-wire, where this stick, which the pilot moves around, is not connected to the ailerons or anything else. It's connected to a computer because it can make decisions faster. The all new fighter aircraft are inherently unstable, but then they fly well because computers think so fast, much faster than even the smartest young pilot can. And I think we've got to recognize that. I think we've got this great machine that we have called the electric grid. I think it needs tending. I think it needs to be treated more like a garden than anything else.
I agree.
Grow the right things in it at the right time. Bill, good luck. I hope we have the chance to spend some time just talking over these, you and myself, somewhere.
Likewise, I would love that.
Yeah,
That's super.
Party thoughts from me real quick is this is the new look of the Digital RoundTable. And we're gonna start promoting the activity in a different way. We're very excited about it. And this is what the sort of commercial piece looks like. So we're, joining the Digital Roundtable to the Digital 360 Summit, which will be again September 26th to the 29th, and very excited about that. So anyway, Johnny, send us away.
Okay. Maybe I didn't love you quite as often as I should have. And maybe I didn't treat you quite as well as I could have. And if I made you feel second best, girl, I'm sorry I was blind. You're always on my mind. You're always on my mind.
Woo! Very nice, John Butler. Very